All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we're diving deep into something that might hit a little too close to home for some of you: toxic relationships. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on how this whole thing plays out for people on the spectrum.
Yeah, and this should be pretty interesting.
We've got a stack of articles here from the Cheap ABA blog. They always have some pretty insightful stuff.
Oh yeah, they really get into it.
One of the big things that jumped out at me just skimming through these articles was this idea of the Fawn response.
Huh. Yeah, the Fawn response.
Have you ever felt like you're just like bending over backwards to please someone,
Oh, all the time.
even when it's hurting you?
Maybe?
Well, it turns out there's actually a name for that:
Yeah.
the Fawn response.
Okay, interesting. So what is that
I
exactly?
was hoping you could tell us.
Well, you know how like sometimes you just feel like you're walking on eggshells around someone?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Constantly worried about saying or doing the wrong thing and making them upset.
Oh, for sure. Like you're just trying to keep the peace, even if it means sacrificing your own needs and feelings.
Exactly. And it's actually a natural survival mechanism.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Like imagine a baby deer.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
It freezes up when it sees headlights.
Right.
It's trying to avoid danger by becoming as non-threatening as possible.
Wow. So it's like basically appeasement.
Right. That's the fawn response.
Yeah.
Inaction.
Yeah.
And while it can be helpful in certain situations,
Sure.
like if you're actually in danger,
Yeah, if someone's trying to attack you or something.
right. But uh, when this response gets triggered in everyday relationships,
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
it can actually make you more vulnerable, especially for people on the spectrum.
That's what the Cheap ABA blog was saying, too.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, autistic individuals often face a lot of social challenges anyway.
Exactly. So their internal alarm system might be set to like a higher sensitivity.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. So they're more likely to perceive certain social interactions as threatening.
Yeah, even when they're not actually dangerous.
And that's when the fawn response kicks in.
Right. They might start prioritizing the other person's needs and emotions above their own, just to avoid any potential conflict or disapproval.
Which can create a pretty dangerous dynamic, especially if they're in a relationship with someone who's manipulative or controlling.
Oh, absolutely. The other person might sense that this person is more likely to go along with things.
Right. Even if it's not in their best interest, they might not even realize they're being taken advantage of.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster, basically.
One of the articles gave an example of an autistic woman.
Okay.
She was constantly making excuses for her partner's bad behavior.
Oh, no.
She was so terrified of upsetting him that she just like fawn all the time.
I've seen that happen.
Trying to keep the peace, but it was really eating away at her self-esteem, like making her question her own worth.
Yeah, it's like she was giving her power away.
Totally.
Hmm.
So in that situation, it's not just about avoiding conflict.
Right.
It's about losing yourself in the process.
Exactly. And that can have some serious consequences down the line. It can lead to, feelings of resentment,
Oh, absolutely.
anxiety, even depression.
So what do you do if you think you might be stuck in this fawn response pattern?
Well, first you have to be able to recognize it.
Okay, but how? What are some of the signs to look out for?
Well, like we talked about, that feeling of constantly walking on eggshells around the other person.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Like you're always second guessing yourself, worried about saying or doing the wrong thing.
Right, like you never feel truly safe or relaxed in the relationship. It's exhausting, really.
Exactly. You might also find yourself making excuses for the other person's behavior.
Oh, yeah, even when they're treating you poorly.
You might blame yourself for their actions or downplay their hurtful words.
Like, it's almost like you're gaslighting yourself, right?
Yeah,
Telling yourself it's not that bad, even when deep down you know something's wrong.
exactly. It's like you're trying to convince yourself that everything's okay, even when it's clearly not.
And for autistic individuals, it can be even harder to recognize these patterns.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because they might be more likely to internalize those negative messages and blame themselves for the problems in the relationship.
Right. It's like they're already dealing with so much in terms of social anxiety and trying to navigate a world that doesn't always understand them.
Right. So then this just adds another layer of complexity.
Exactly. And it makes it even more important to talk about these things, to raise awareness and help people understand the dynamics at play.
Well, that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. It's all about empowering people with the knowledge and tools they need to build healthy relationships.
Absolutely. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about solutions. What can someone actually do if they recognize themselves in these descriptions? The Cheap ABA blog kept emphasizing this idea of setting boundaries. What does that even look like in a real relationship?
Well, setting boundaries is all about learning to say no. You know,
Easier said than done.
it is.
Oh,
But it's about recognizing that you have the right to be treated with respect, to have your feelings validated, and to prioritize your own needs.
and for someone who's used to prioritizing everyone else's needs above their own.
Yeah, no, it's a huge shift.
And the cheap ABA blog was saying that autistic individuals might have an especially hard time with this whole boundary thing
Yeah,
because,
because they might be more sensitive to conflict or have a really strong desire to avoid social rejection.
so how do you even start to develop those skills, especially if you've never really practiced setting boundaries before?
Well, the first step is awareness, right? You
Yeah.
have to be able to recognize when your boundaries are being crossed and how those violations are making you feel.
Okay, so awareness.
And then from there, it's about practicing assertive communication, communicating your needs and limits clearly and directly without being aggressive or confrontational.
Which can be super scary.
It is scary, especially if you're used to just going along with things to keep the peace.
The cheap ABA blog suggested starting small,
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
like maybe saying no to a small request
Okay.
or expressing your opinion,
Right.
even if you think the other person might not agree with you.
Exactly. It's about building those muscles of self-advocacy, you know, recognizing that your voice matters.
And as you start setting those boundaries, you might be surprised at how much more empowered you feel.
No, absolutely. It's a game changer for sure. It's not just about protecting yourself from harm, but it's also about reclaiming your sense of self and your right to have your needs met in a relationship.
Okay, that's huge.
It is. It's about creating a relationship that's actually balanced and reciprocal, where both people's needs are valued and respected.
Which brings us to another point that the cheap ABA blog kept hammering on:
What's that?
self-compassion.
Ah, yes, self-compassion. That's so important, especially if you've been in a toxic relationship where you've been constantly criticized or put down.
It's so easy to fall into that pattern of self-blame and negative self-talk.
It is, especially if you've been conditioned to believe that you're the problem. But the truth is, you are worthy of love and respect, regardless of what anyone else might say or do. And that starts with treating yourself with the same kindness and compassion that you would offer to a friend.
Oh, I love that. That's so powerful. And it includes forgiving yourself for past mistakes.
Oh, absolutely.
It's okay to acknowledge that you might have made choices that weren't in your best interest, but it's important to move forward with self-compassion rather than self-judgment.
You got it. Holding on to that guilt and shame is only going to keep you stuck in the past.
There was a really great quote in one of the articles that said something like, "You can't heal from the wounds of a toxic relationship if you're constantly picking at the scabs."
Ooh, that's good.
Right. It's such a vivid image. It's a reminder that healing takes time and that we need to be patient and gentle with ourselves as we go through the process.
Yeah, we all need a little grace, especially when we're trying to recover from something that's hurt us.
Well, this has been really insightful. It's fascinating how this fawn response, something that's meant to protect us, can sometimes backfire, especially for autistic individuals.
It's a reminder that we need to be mindful of our own needs and be willing to prioritize our well-being, even if it means like setting boundaries or walking away from relationships that are no longer serving us.
Which can be a really difficult thing to do, especially if you're someone who's used to putting others first.
It is tough, but remember, you deserve to be in relationships where you feel safe, respected, and loved for who you truly are.
Couldn't agree more. And that's a great place to wrap up this first part of our deep dive into toxic relationships and the fawn response. Welcome back, everyone. So we just finished talking all about the fawn response and how it can make autistic people more vulnerable in toxic relationships. And one thing that really stood out in those cheap ABA articles was the whole thing about recognizing specific toxic behaviors. It's not always so easy to see those red flags, you know?
Oh, tell me about it. Especially when you're caught up in the middle of it all.
Right. It's like you're in the thick of it. So I guess the question is, how do you spot those red flags?
Well, one of the most common ones is gaslighting.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of gaslighting.
But do you actually, know what it means?
Honestly, I'm not totally sure.
Okay, so it's basically when the toxic person tries to make you doubt your own sanity.
What? Seriously?
Yeah, for real. They might, deny things that you know happened. Or twist your words around to make you feel crazy.
Wow, that's messed up.
Right. And it can be really damaging, especially for someone who's already struggling with social anxiety or self-esteem.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The Cheap ABA blog had this one example.
Oh, yeah.
This autistic guy was dating this woman,
Okay.
and she would constantly put him down.
Like, what would she say?
Oh, she'd make fun of his interests or tell him his opinions were stupid.
Ouch. That's harsh.
And whenever he tried to say her words were hurting him, she'd just turn it around on him.
What do you mean?
She'd say he was being too sensitive or misinterpreting what she said.
Oh, I see. So she's basically invalidating his feelings.
Yeah, exactly. And over time, he started to believe her.
No way, really?
Yep. He started to question his own perceptions and think that he was the problem.
Man, that's so sad. Like she was literally messing with his head.
And that's the thing about gaslighting. It can be really subtle.
Right, like it sneaks up on you.
Exactly. You might not even realize it's happening until it's already done a lot of damage.
So how do you protect yourself from that?
Well, the cheap ABA blog suggested a couple of things.
Okay, like what?
One thing you could do is keep a journal or log of the interactions that feel off.
Like write down everything that happens.
Well, not everything, but like the things that make you feel confused or upset or that you know aren't right.
Okay, so that way you have a record of what actually happened.
Exactly. Because gaslighters often try to make you think you're misremembering things.
Oh, that's smart.
And another thing you can do is talk to people you trust about what's going on.
Like friends and family.
Yep. People who know you well and have your best interests at heart.
Why is that so important?
Because toxic people often try to isolate you from your support system.
Oh, wow.
They want to be the only voice you hear so they can control you more easily.
That's creepy.
Right. So it's really important to have those outside perspectives. Your friends and family can help you see the situation more clearly and remind you that you're not crazy.
So keep a journal, talk to your friends and family. Anything else?
Oh, and this might sound kind of woo-woo.
Okay, I'm listening.
Trust your gut.
My gut.
Yeah, your intuition. That little voice inside that tells you something's not right.
Oh, yeah, like that feeling of unease you get in your stomach.
Exactly.
But sometimes it can be hard to trust those instincts.
Oh, I know, especially if you're used to people-pleasing or second-guessing yourself.
Yeah.
But if something feels off, it probably is.
Okay, so trust your gut. Got it. So we've talked about gaslighting, but what other red flags should we be on the lookout for?
Well, another big one is constant criticism.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It's one thing if someone offers you constructive feedback, in a way that's helpful and supportive, but it's a whole different ball game if they're constantly putting you down or making you feel bad about yourself.
Right, like it's not about helping you grow, it's about making you feel small.
Exactly. The Cheap ABA blog had this great analogy.
Oh, yeah.
They said it's like the difference between watering a plant to help it grow
Okay.
and pouring acid on it.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. Constructive criticism is like water. It nourishes you.
But toxic criticism is like acid. It just eats away at you.
And for autistic individuals who might be more sensitive to criticism.
Right, or have a harder time reading social cues.
Exactly. Those negative messages can be really damaging.
So if you're constantly being criticized or put down in a relationship, that's a big red flag.
Huge red flags.
What else?
Another one is control and manipulation.
Oh, like what?
Like, does this person try to control who you spend time with?
Okay, yeah.
What you wear?
Yeah.
What you do in your free time?
Oh, wow. So they're basically trying to run your life.
Pretty much.
Yep.
And it can start really subtly, like little things, making you feel guilty for hanging out with your friends or questioning your decisions. But over time, it can get a lot worse.
The Cheap ABA blog mentioned this one case.
Oh, yeah.
This woman's partner would constantly check her phone and social media.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah, like he was trying to monitor her every move.
That's messed up.
Right. And the thing is, sometimes this controlling behavior can be disguised as love or concern.
Yeah, that's the scary part. The toxic person might say things like, I just love you so much I can't stand the thought of you being with anyone else.
Right, or like, I'm just worried about you. That's why I need to know where you are all the time.
Exactly. But that's not love. That's possessiveness and control.
And you deserve better than that.
Way better. You deserve to be in a relationship where you feel trusted and respected.
So we've talked about these red flags, but what do you do if you see them in your own life? Like, what are some actual steps you can take?
Well, one of the most important things is to start setting boundaries like we talked about before.
Right. But we talked about that a bit in the last part. Can you give us some, like, more specific examples?
Yeah. Let's say your partner criticizes your appearance all the time.
Okay, I've been there.
A boundary you could set is, I'm not okay with you making negative comments about my body. If you do it again, I'm going to leave the room.
Okay, so you're basically drawing a line in the sand.
Exactly. And it might feel really hard to do at first.
Oh, I bet. Especially if you're used to just taking it or trying to please the other person.
It is tough,
Yeah.
but you're worth it. And every time you set a boundary and enforce it, you're sending a message that you're not going to tolerate that behavior.
So set boundaries. What else?
Oh, and lean on your support system, your friends, your family, a therapist if you have one. These are the people who can help you through this.
Yeah, because sometimes it can be really hard to see things clearly when you're in the middle of it all.
Totally. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is just walk away from the relationship altogether.
I know that can be a really hard decision.
It is, especially if you've invested a lot in it.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's the only way to protect yourself.
One of those cheap ABA articles had this quote. It said, "Staying in a toxic relationship is like trying to breathe underwater."
Ooh, wow.
Right. You might be able to hold your breath for a while, but eventually you're going to drown.
That's heavy. But it's true. You can't survive in an environment that's toxic to you.
So I guess the takeaway here is, if you're in a relationship that's constantly making you feel bad about yourself, it's time to take a step back and think about what's really going on. You deserve so much more than that.
You do. You deserve to be in a relationship where you feel loved, respected, and supported. And remember, asking for help is not a weakness.
It's actually a
I-
sign of strength. All right, we'll be right back with more on building healthy relationships, so don't go anywhere. Okay, we're back. And, after talking about all this heavy stuff about toxic relationships, I bet some of you are wondering, how do you actually build a healthy one?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Totally. It's like we've been talking about all the weeds in the garden, but how do we actually plant some flowers?
Love that analogy. Well, the cheap ABA articles had some good advice on this. And one of the big things they emphasized was mutual respect.
Yeah, mutual respect. It sounds pretty basic, but I guess it's easy to forget sometimes.
It really is. But in a healthy relationship, you know, both people value each other's opinions and feelings, even if they don't agree all the time.
Right. It's like that whole saying, you can disagree without being disagreeable.
Exactly. You can have those tough conversations without attacking each other or trying to control the other person.
And cheap ABA also talked about the importance of open and honest communication.
Oh, yeah. Communication is key.
Yeah.
Being able to talk about your feelings and thoughts directly, and also really listening to what the other person has to say.
Which can be tricky, especially for folks on the spectrum, right?
For sure. Sometimes social communication and expressing emotions can be a struggle.
So what do you do about that?
Well, the cheap ABA folks suggested practicing in a safe environment, like maybe with a therapist or a close friend, just to get more comfortable with expressing yourself.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, like a dress rehearsal for real life.
Love it.
Yeah.
So we've got mutual respect, open communication. What else is important?
Support. Feeling like you can really count on the other person.
Like they've got your back.
Totally. Both emotionally and practically. Like being there for the big stuff, of course.
But also the little stuff, right?
Exactly. Celebrating your wins with you. Just being there to listen when you're having a bad day.
We're just goofing off and having fun together.
Oh, yeah. All those little moments add up. They build the foundation for a strong relationship.
And I think it helps if you have some shared interests or values, too.
Definitely. Having some common ground can really help you connect.
But you don't have to be exactly alike, right?
Of course not. Actually, sometimes those differences can make things more interesting.
It's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
Having things in common, but also respecting each other's individuality.
You got it. So mutual respect, open communication, support, shared interests. It's starting to sound like a pretty awesome relationship.
It does, right. But like you said, it takes work, effort.
And a willingness to learn and grow together.
And remember, no relationship is perfect. Everyone's going to have their ups and downs.
Absolutely. The important thing is having the tools to handle those challenges in a healthy way.
Which includes all this stuff we've been talking about today. Recognizing toxic behaviors, setting boundaries, communicating effectively.
And being kind to yourself throughout the process. Don't forget the self-compassion.
So if you're listening to this and thinking, man, I want a relationship like that, it is possible.
It really is. It might take some work, maybe even some help from a therapist or a counselor.
But it's definitely worth it.
It's so worth it.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive into toxic relationships and the Fawn response. I learned so much, and I hope our listeners did too.
Me too. It's been great talking about this.
If this resonated with you, go check out the Cheap ABA blog. They've got tons of great stuff on autism and relationships.
And remember, you are not alone in this.
There are people who care about you and want to support you, and you are strong and capable of creating healthy, fulfilling relationships.
That's right. Believe in yourself and keep learning and growing.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. See you next time.